We're recording. Here comes the music.
They said it couldn't be done. They said it wouldn't last. White man, black man. Merica F1. Merica F1 coming to you straight from San Francisco, California. Sherman Tillman, Michael Lawler. Merica F1.
Welcome to another episode of Merica F1, and today we're doing a Monaco qualifying reaction as we had a pretty, I would say, exciting qualifying. And typically in Monaco, this is the best part of the race, the qualifying. And today we have a special guest all the way from Dublin, Ireland, Paul Schulman. Did I say that right, Paul? Paul?
You did.
Oh, nice.
You did?
All right. Paul, I met Paul through Facebook. Paul moderates the Mercedes-Benz group on Facebook. He also started the Sir Lewis Hamilton Ferrari page on Facebook. So Paul's kind of like somebody like, in the know in Formula One. And as you know, on our podcast, we always like to have guests that are knowledgeable and that can bring something to the show. And we really think that Paul would be a great addition. So here's Paul's first day on Merica F1. Welcome, Paul.
Hello there. How are you?
What do you have to... Now, did I miss anything? You want to give more background?
I can give you a little bit. So look, I'm 59 years of age. I'm living in Ireland. I've been watching since I was 5 years of age. I engulf any and all F1 news. I find it a fascinating sport, and I got onto Facebook little by little about 4 or 5 years ago as far as F1 was concerned. Started getting involved in a few comments and then put a few posts, and suddenly I got these likes. And I was like, whoa, people are actually reading what I'm doing. And then I started to put together some more detailed posts. This led me to being invited to being a moderator actually on a few clubs. So the Sir Lewis Hamilton #1, which has about 320,000 members. And then I was invited to join the Mercedes Petronas F1 team, their non-official club. And then it led to, well, basically, recently, February the 1st, I heard the rumor that Lewis was going to go to Ferrari. So I immediately jumped on Facebook and I registered Sir Lewis Hamilton Ferrari F1. And the club has grown now to 8,700 members, and I'm absolutely over the moon. It's the second or third time I've done admin. And it leads me to sort of changing the narrative where necessary. I find that supporting Lewis particularly has some real downsides, especially as a moderator in the background. So it's made me even more passionate to ensure that the right things are printed and the wrong things are removed. And then meeting you, of course, which I'm very grateful for. And here we go. So that's it.
That's awesome, Paul. You know, what I love is when I read your stuff on Facebook and I read your posts, I can tell not only that you're passionate, but you're informed. You're an informed Formula One fan. I mean, I haven't been watching as long as you. I've only been watching since the Michael Schumacher era. So that's how I got into Formula One, watching Michael Schumacher. And they used to come on what we have in the States called Wild Wilder Sports on Channel 7 here, ABC, and it used to be on Saturdays. And so that's how I got into the sport. I wouldn't say I was as passionate as I am now. And that passion came in that Schumacher, Senna, and then Hamilton and Alonso, when that all kind of melded together, that's when I really, really got into the sport. And since 2012, like I go to, a couple races a year, and I've upped it these last couple of years to 4. And, I love Formula One so much. And I love meeting people who are passionate and as knowledgeable. Not saying that I'm super knowledgeable, but at least delve into the weeds of Formula One. And it's a pleasure having you on today. And let's get right into it, Paul. Charles Leclerc.
Absolutely.
Will
Charles
he?
Leclerc. Wow, isn't that a stunning? I'm absolutely delighted for him. I believe it's his third time to get pole in Monaco. I'm really hoping that he can convert this into a win tomorrow. But we've all got to hold our breath because we've just seen it too many times that either he might touch a wall or something goes wrong with the car, and it's robbed him of a first in Monaco.
They say Charles has a Monaco curse. Now, let's give a little background. In 2017, when he was in F2, he had a DNF. He started on pole, and then their safety car came out, and he drifted back to fourth place. And then he had a mechanical issue and ended up crashing into another back marker, and then out he went. In 2018, he had brake failure when he was with Alfa Romeo. 2019, remember, he had a really fast time in Q1, but for some reason, as we know the Ferraris with their strategy, they kept him into the garage, and then that time didn't qualify for Q2. In 2021, he clipped the wall near that swimming pool chicane and broke the right front suspension, but Ferrari didn't want to take the 5-grid penalty by replacing the gearbox, so they sent him out. And then it stalled on the way to the grid, and he never got to participate in the race. In 2022, they had that tire debacle where it was raining, and if they would have waited and gone from wet to dry, he would have won the race. But, of course, it's Ferrari, and they went from wet to intermediate. He had to come back in, and away everybody else went. And in 2023, he got a penalty for impeding Lando Norris in qualifying, and that dropped him down the grid. So will this be the year, Paul? Will this be the year?
Yes, it's going to happen tomorrow. But the look on Fred, that's the manager of Ferrari team, the look on his
Fred
face,
Vasseur.
Yeah, Fred Vasseur. The look on his face when he was interviewed was just one of completely, I don't want to jinx this, which I don't know if you use that word in America.
We do.
Another word, but we do. So the look of I don't want to jinx this was on his face, a look of dread. He's obviously thrilled that the team's got that far up to qualifying first, but the conversion into winning the race, he just feels it's a long journey. So I hope for Charles. He's such a nice guy, and his new puppy Leo.
I am praying for Charles. I mean, if anybody deserves to win this, other than Yuki or Norris or Piastri, I would say out of all the people on the grid, I think everyone will be happy if Charles can convert this. And
yes,
out of all the people who get poles, and I think this is Charles, I could be wrong, but I think this is his 26th pole position in Formula One. And he only has 5 wins, and that's a win rate of 17%. And if you look at the best drivers on the grid, Max's pole to win rate is obviously the best of all time. It's at 77%, which is just amazing. Hamilton's is 58. Schumacher's is 58. Vettel had a 54 percentage. Senna was 44, and Alonso in his heyday had a 63%. And I'm kind of surprised that he just can't seem to get the wins from the pole. What do you think that is, Paul?
I think it's got a lot to do with the car rather than the driver in this case. He doesn't crash out as much. So I would say that the problem has been with the Ferrari car, the team, the strategy, and that's why he hasn't converted a lot of those poles.
Now, do you... Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, do you know that the last time Alonso won a championship, Lewis Hamilton was still in F2?
Wow. Well, Fernando, we all know his downfalls, so we won't even dive into that. That could be a whole pod on itself, just talking about Fernando. But do you think, have you seen like a change in the Ferrari team since Fred Vasseur has taken place. They're calling him the Godfather because he's bringing in
100%.
so many new people into Ferrari, and he's kicking out the people that he thinks are maybe the problem.
100%. I think actually it doesn't just go down to Fred. I think it runs all the way to the top to Elkin. And Elkin, I think, has finally decided or convinced the board to open their checkbook and actually hire from outside of the factory walls from Ferrari for the first time in many decades. And it is already showing. So the likes of they've brought in, I think, about 10 or 15 engineers from outside of, usually they bring them in through their own development and teach them and train them inside the factory. And this time they've gone, no, obviously this is not working for us for now. What is over it? Well, it's been since Kimi Räikkönen won a championship. So they've now got the chance to actually go, okay, we'll use the checkbook and we'll start bringing in the real people. And so the likes of Fred, the likes of Lewis, and I look, we can't put money on it, but I think it's going to be Adrian Newey is going to be there. He's not going to be in the God Almighty position of being the chief designer, etc. I think he's going to do it as a contractor, but that's another podcast. And I just think that they're putting together the dream team as best as possible by using their checkbook, which is it's what Red Bull did. So why not? This is how it works in Formula One.
100%. The only thing that I'm just hoping and praying, because Charles Leclerc, in my opinion, is the best qualifier on the grid right now as we speak, considering the car that he has. I think he's the best qualifier. And next year, when Lewis goes there, and Lewis' qualifying performance hasn't been on par with what he's normally at, and I think there's a lot of different issues that go into that, but he's going to have a hard time out qualifying Charles next year. And I know he'll be better in racecraft, but that's going to be an uphill climb, I think, in qualifying for Lewis next year.
Well, okay, so if you want to switch the conversation towards this, I would say, yes, I do believe that Charles is a very good qualifier. Unfortunately, he has fallen back, but you can use the stick that we're all, a lot of people are talking about George, and a lot of people get rubbed up the wrong way about George. They think he's the posh boy. They don't like him. A lot of the English people don't like him. And you have to hark back to the days of Lewis and Bottas. Now, Bottas had his moments where he could outshine in qualifying, and then he would get into the race and he would fall back mid-race. He'd get tired, he'd get grumpy. His strategy wasn't right, and all the moans and groans. And it's exactly the same now with George. It's almost a mirror image. George... George shows flashes of brilliance, and then he gets all heated up in the race, and then he uses up his tires. He's not a good racecrafter yet. And how do I feel that then Lewis will fare up against Charles? Well, the problem we have here is that Lewis is 39 right now. He's going to go to Ferrari. He's not going to know the car. He won't have that much practice and time. A lot nowadays happens on track, in race, and in practice rather than free practice. And will Lewis struggle when he goes to Ferrari to understand the car, the makeup of the car, and how it's going to respond? And will that make him equal to Charles? Well, first, certainly not in the first 6 months. But then after that, I think that the skill set of Lewis will shine. Certainly, we've seen the Ferrari driven correctly in races. The car has brilliances. But this is the ultimate. Is he going to outshine Charles? And genuinely, I think that Lewis will outshine Charles. Will he outqualify him? Only time will tell. How long will it take? Maybe 6 months. And the biggest disappointment is that Lewis is getting older. He's probably going to stay until he's 41, 42, maybe. And then what will happen is, we've got the big changes in 2026. So then it will be a huge reset for everybody. And a lot of money is being gambled on the Mercedes engine. So is Lewis's jump the right jump? So there you go.
I like that. I like that take. Now, I agree with that 100%. It's going to take him time to get into the car, get used to the car, used to the people around him. But once he gets used to the car, even though he is a little bit older, his racecraft is just, he's one of the top wheel-to-wheel, in my opinion, wheel-to-wheel drivers there is out. He's very respectful. He gives people space and until you push him like Max has always done, and then he's not going to budge because you have to stand up to bullies. But I think it's going to be the greatest time of these since Rosberg left, where we're going to have some great inter-team racing finally at the front, and that's what everybody wants to see. Now let's move on to the Monaco qualifying, and Max qualified in 6th. What happened, Paul? What happened to Max?
Well, you see, all the hardened Max fans are going to say that it was track specific, that the car is not set up for short tracks. But, we're going to touch on this a little bit, and please don't slate me for this, but I genuinely feel that there's now 2 or 3 races have happened where it just wasn't going Red Bull's way. And is this because Adrian has been pushed to the back because he's not allowed now in the meetings? And he actually, Adrian Newey is not a bitch. And I'm sorry to use the word, but it's true. He's an older guy who's a chief designer. He's had more wins, I think, as a designer than anybody else. And all of a sudden, he's making mention that he's not allowed in the meetings. And I think it's rubbing Adrian up the wrong way. Also, he's actually only going to show up to the races where apparently they have RB19 customers, which is the hyper road car he's building for them, before he departs. And it just seems like it's potentially that Red Bull reached the top of the hill. And there is only 2 things that can happen when you get to the top of the hill. You can spin your wheels and stay there, or you can start coming down the other side. At the same time, there has now been, a year and a half of catch-up for design. Everybody's taken the pictures, they see the data, and they're starting to work out what it was aero-wise that Red Bull created. And look, I will be honest and open and forthright. I am not a Max Verstappen fan for various reasons, but at the same time, I will say that he, in the right car, is skilled at staying at the front. I think he's a one-trick pony. I call him, this kind of torpedo driver where he will slipstream you down the inside and then forget to turn the wheel at the corner. And then he will nerf the opponent off track. And I just don't respect him for that. But given the right car, he is able to maneuver it well in qualifying. You can't take that away from him. And he is able to stay at the front when given the opportunity. Now, I know a lot of fans will start giving out to me for that, but it's just how I see it. I'm not saying he's a bad driver, but I think that if this current Red Bull is going to start falling back because others are catching up with the design, I also think that they are using a trash bin full of spare parts from Honda and a bunch of engineers they had left over. They bought the rights to the designs, and now the engine is starting to give them some grief. And mark my words, you're now going to see as we go into the season, they've used up a lot of their spare parts, their allocation spare parts, and they're going to start suffering with penalties and being pushed back down to the grid because the engine is being pushed that much harder now to keep up with the modern designs being presented by the other teams and the engines they already possess. So watching Max, saying the car is unsettled and this and that, you're going to hear a lot more moaning in a lot more tracks. I don't think this is just track specific. I think they're starting to fall back a little bit. Or not just fall back, but I think other teams are catching up.
Now, that was a good take, Paul. What I'd like to let's get a little bit into the weeds on that. Why do you think that Honda and Red Bull parted ways?
Okay, so Red Bull have managed to work their way through the grid of engine manufacturers over a period of time. and without using expletives, they have peed off everybody on the grid. And at one stage, when they were desperately looking for an engine after, I think it was Renault, and the way they treated Renault and the way they spoke to them, it came down very quickly that, Mercedes had no interest in supporting Red Bull. They were already supporting, I think, 3 teams with engines. Ferrari were supporting 3 teams. So they weren't interested. And Honda, who had disappeared and then had failed actually in Formula One, then came back and said, okay, we'll give you the engine. And, the engine took a long time to come good. We all remember how many times the Red Bull would fail, in races. Race after race, it was happening at some point. So now that, finally the engine came good. Red Bull opened its checkbook. They sold a lot of cans of pop to bring a lot of engineers in from other teams. They took a lot of people from Mercedes, a lot of people from other teams, and they finally got the best. They're wringing the neck out of that engine now. And even so, for some reason, the engine was okay when they had the great aero package. But now that the others have caught up with an aero package, their engines are nearly stronger. So you're starting to see some issues are starting to come into that Red Bull. They're having to push the Red Bull harder and harder, and it's going to show. But I think they've already come to allocation fulfillment with certain parts. Like I think it's PU engines, the PU, which is the power unit. I think there's about 5-6 pieces that are under budget, and they've nearly used up some of that amount. So I don't want to waffle on that, but they are coming close to the limits, and therefore they're going to start seeing penalties sooner than later. And that could have a big difference. If they're starting 10th, starting 15th on the grid from penalties, other teams that are starting to catch up now may actually get the advantage towards the mid and the end of this season.
I would love by mid to end of the season if Max was close or some other driver was close to him in winning the championship, because I want to see what Max is really like, if he's learned anything about wheel-to-wheel racing. It's easy. I kind of liken him to Vettel to a certain extent, where, remember when Vettel got that past that first corner, he was gone. That race was over. And I liken Max to that same thing. He's a front runner, but when you see him race wheel-to-wheel coming through the pack, there's always an issue. He's running people off the road. He's knocking people. He's not making the turn. He's making his turn. He's going to the turn wide, and now they're off the track. And of course, he doesn't get a penalty. I want to see that Max Verstappen. And I always said that when Vettel was driving, I said, I want to see this guy come back to the pack. And he did. When we went to Ferrari, we saw when he was in the fight in 2019 with Lewis Hamilton, he had the lead. And he cracked under that pressure. We both know it. He did. Yeah. Lewis caught him and he cracked. Of course, Ferrari had their Ferrari things that they did back then. But he had a huge lead. He lost it. And I think Max is in that same mode. I think Max is probably a little bit better than Vettel only because he's solely focused on just racing and nothing else. But I think Vettel had better racecraft wheel to wheel. And I finally want to see, is Max learned anything? And I don't think he has.
Well, my take on it is this, that if Red Bull suffers next year, Max will leave at the end of that year, which is the end of 25. He won't sit around and wait to watch a team fall apart. And now we all know the rumors, it's been rife that, Toto Wolff has tried to make a play for him to go to Mercedes. And the inference is that in 2026, Mercedes has a fantastic setup for their half and half, which is the electricity and original engine. Everybody is talking about this as being a very, very strong unit, as they had before. I mean, when they had the advantage over others, and nobody truly has the belief that Red Bull has got the package together, and they're coupling with Ford for their the hybrid part. Where the heck has Ford been for the last, 20 years in Formula One? They were there through other companies, but they've, so there's an unknown here, and Red Bull is taking a serious chance that Ford is going to supply half of the power. And to what end? To what engine is Red Bull going to produce? Because it's not a Honda engine now. It's going to have to be built from the ground up. So where does that put Max in the pack? I think that if it comes about in 2025 that Red Bull fall backwards, Max will be gone. I genuinely think he'll walk. And Max has made it quite clear he doesn't have... Look, I genuinely think that Max is kind of, I suppose, in the nicest way possible, I think Max is on the spectrum, and he doesn't care the way others care about the passion for Formula One. He's there to drive. That's it. He doesn't care for the public. He doesn't care for the fans. He had to be coached to thank his fans after, 6 years. He's been told, you've got to thank the fans. The fans are your support. The fans bring in the merch. The fans sell the tickets. Max doesn't care. He's more or less made it known that he would walk to go to another series. I mean, the guy just spent last week, before the race, he'd spent on a sim racing, in virtual reality. So you know this, right?
Yes,
you do know this. Yeah, I mean, it was like if you could see the look on Christian Horner's face when he's like, "Oh yeah, he did very well in the virtual race," and you're thinking he's getting paid a couple of million a race to show up to be the Formula One guy and to get the rest he needs and to do what he has to do. He spent 2 hours, I believe, racing on the morning of the race itself. Now, he won the race, but that's not the point. It's, and you're paying a guy that much to go and earn nothing doing a sim race. Well, you're going to have some questions. So Max's honestly, his own true belief was, I want to get to Formula One. I want to win. I've proven I can win. And if I don't like it, I'm going to walk away. So people shouldn't bet a whole lot of money on the longevity of Max. Whereas, okay, and I know you talk about Max, people hate to hear about Lewis, but look what Lewis has done. Look what Alonso has done. The longevity is the passion that they believe. They give up their lives to be these guys that sit in these rocket ships. The energy they have to do the entire year is about diet and training and the mentality for it all, and putting up with the press and the conversations and everything, the training that they, meaning the sims and the technical meetings they have to sit in. Whereas Max couldn't care less. Max is like, get the car ready. I'm getting in the car. Let's go. If the car's wrong, I'll talk to you, but don't make me do all the other stuff. He's got no interest. And that's why I think that if it didn't go his way, he would walk from Formula One as quickly as you'd walk away from a fresh dog poop.
I believe that too. He said it, and if people pay attention, he said it. He'll go to another series, or he'll just quit altogether and just sim race. He does not care about leaving a long legacy in Formula One. He'll stay as long as he's in front. He said as much.
Yeah, hell no. He has got the way that, okay, let's switch the conversation split second to Lewis. The legacy that he is leaving behind him. I mean, look, I'm going to say this again. I'm a 59-year-old man. I think I've got a pretty high IQ. And that's the only person that I've ever thought about as a hero, apart from my own father, was Lewis Hamilton, and what he has done in Formula One, and what he's trying to do off track, and what he's trying to do for the future, and what he's trying to do for equality. I don't care whether that's race, creed, color, or sex. He is just leaving a trail behind him that will make change for the world. And for that reason, and his philanthropy and what he's like. Now, I everything apart from the really every other week there's this really positive message, which I could do without. I'm of an older generation. But other than that, I think the guy is just fantastic. He's a hero. He's an actual hero. And I truly hope for his sake. Look, let's go back to the 2021 for a split second. He was robbed. It shouldn't have happened. We won't sort of dawdle on this. But honestly, he he deserved that, the eighth championship then. So he deserves to win one now that will let him leave Formula One with his head held high, proving that it was about a skill set. And if he wins a championship in Ferrari, it'll be a championship in 3 different teams, which would be a stunning feat in itself.
I also don't want to delve into 2021 because we're talking about Monaco, but I do want to say that one of the greatest things I've ever seen a man do is congratulate another man who stole. Well, he didn't steal it, but it was stolen from you. But no, Max didn't have nothing to do with that. Max didn't do that, but Massey and all the things that happened that day. But he pulled himself up to get over there and congratulate another man that he knew it should have been him. And I thought that, to me, that was one of the greatest moments in motorsports, to see him pull himself from being at the highest of high to the lowest of lows and bringing himself up to congratulate the guy that took what he should have had. I was like, man, this guy is a model for all little kids who want to either get into sports or racing to look up to, because that moment in history proved how great he was.
It was already organized, but he became a Sir days later, and never a befitting title should be given to somebody for the way he behaved as to what happened to him that day. And we won't. Okay, we won't. We'll go back to Monaco. I'm actually watching the F2 for the second time as we speak. And let's talk about Monaco, because I am upset when I hear so many, obviously with the Facebook groups, etc. I see so many people going, oh, we should get rid of Monaco. It's just a procession. It's just this. It's just that. I just go, I cringe, and my heart breaks, because Monaco is probably one of the greatest races on the calendar. It's the spectacle itself is incredible. I've been watching now for the last couple of days, and the new camera angles they've introduced brings us everything. And I was always very worried, because street circuits, you tend to have camera switch, and it's very hard for the eyes. But they have just perfected it for this year. And anybody that tunes in and watches tomorrow will see this as well. And there are more crashes in Formula 2 right now, which makes it a spectacle in itself. And it is just a stunning circuit, and it's a piece of art to get around. And if nobody, if somebody's brand new and tuning in and listening to this podcast today, the effect, I've sat in a single-seater race car. I have driven a single-seater race car. Now, it was a piece of junk, and it was a 1.6 liter, and it felt like a little carbon tub. And you sit in there and you get strapped in, and you look to your left and you look to your right, and you see this carbon tub. You see the edges, and you think, God, if I crash this thing, my neck would be just severed. I'd be gone. And then you think about when you've done a few laps in these things, and it's cold as well. And when you think about what these guys go through, and they were talking today, the average speed around Monaco for the Formula One cars is 105 miles an hour. The average speed. That it takes into account all of the turns, all of the corners, and they are millimeters away from the edges, the steel and concrete edges. And they do this in these incredible machines, and then they do it against 19 other people. And it is just awesome, and it is awe-inspiring that these athletes who have got precision and dedication, and it, to me, like, to say that Monaco is not, it's a boring track. Well, you need to get HD television. You need a 4K television. You need to see the detail in this. You need to understand what goes into the makeup of these incredible machines. These are rockets on wheels. They could drive one of these things through a tunnel upside down. And it would stick to the roof of the tunnel. They are so incredibly made, and I hope more and more people. And by the way, talking about involvement and inclusion, in Facebook, I am seeing a massive amount of women come forward, that never used to come forward before, and have involved themselves in Formula One. And I cannot wait to see a woman driving a Formula One car. And I'm a huge supporter of a girl called Jamie Chadwick, who's actually racing in I think you called it the NXT in the States.
Yeah, she actually had an ad on, she was actually in an ad on Instagram just the other day. I saw her. Yeah.
Yeah, and she had her first podium recently. She got her first podium. I think she came third. And it's like, it's just amazing to see her. And she's now advocating for women. And Susie Wolff, Toto Wolff's wife, is the chairman of the women's series, the W series. It's not called the W series anymore. Formula One Academy, I think it is.
Yes, it's called Formula One Academy. Correct.
Formula One Academy. And she is an advocate for Formula One and for women in Formula One. And it has to happen. I'm sorry. The only sexist, stupid thing I've ever heard is, a woman's frame cannot take the G-forces, which is absolute rubbish. Any of these ladies who train the way the men train, they can develop the neck muscles to do exactly the same thing. And it is time. It is time to have women in Formula One. I can't wait. I think it would be stunning. But
Mike,
again, back to Monaco.
Mike thinks... our co-host here, Mike, he thinks there will be a woman in Formula One in the future, and he says that she's going to win a race because he likens it to fighter pilots. And they say that women are really good as far as fighter pilots go. They have really good reactions and they act, I guess the only difference is, the under pressure thing that the men have a little bit better over the women. But he says that he thinks that there will be a race winner in the future that's a woman. That's his full belief. He said he's raced against some women in karting, and he said there was this one woman. He says, and if there's another woman like her, because she didn't get the shot, because we all know there has to be a whole package. You have to have the backing, you have to have the right time, the right people behind you. There's a lot of politics that go into getting into Formula One and the upper racing series. And he said, if that woman had the chance to have the backing that a lot of these other guys had, he said she would have been somebody. He quoted, and he raced for a long time. He won in karting and everything, and he swears by it. But I'd love to see that. I want everybody to get a chance in Formula One, and I think it's about time that stop being the sport of, like people like Lance Stroll who buy their way in. I don't like that because it's obvious that he doesn't belong. And I think there's a lot of people out there that do belong and they don't get the chance because they don't have the money and they don't have the backing and they're not in the right, the right series, or it's not the right time in history for them. But I look forward for that in the future. And I want to thank you for bringing that up. Now, moving back to Monaco. Now, I had the great opportunity to go to Monaco a couple years ago with my good friend Mark Neal, and him and I he goes to a race a year with me, and we went to Monza last year, and we went to Monaco, and everybody who says that Monaco has to be taken off the calendar are 1,000,000% mistaken. It is the best race to go to, not only for the amenities, the sights, the sounds, how beautiful it is, but it's the closest you can get to the Formula One car. When you're watching, it's the closest of all the circuits. You can't get any closer than at Monaco. You can walk on the track on the regular days at night that they're racing on. When we would walk up to the restaurant, we're walking by where they go. We were walking on the track. We could see Lando Norris at a restaurant. You could see Charles Leclerc. You could go by the Ferrari and the Mercedes dealerships that are right down the promenade and go in and see the cars and maybe get lucky and get into a party. Or you could see it's just so beautiful. It's 30 minutes to get to Italy. You could go to Nice. You could go to Cannes. And for all the people who say it's a procession, yeah, well, there's a lot more to racing than just racing, if that makes any sense for the viewers out there. And for every Formula One fan, I pray that you get to go to Monaco one time and experience a race at Monaco. That's how passionate I am that Monaco has to stay. And it's all the drivers' favorite race. It's the most challenging for them, and they all love it. So who are the fans out there to say any better than what the actual people doing the racing say.
I think the problem is that Monaco has tended to be all about qualifying. And once we get into the second lap of the race, it's kind of a procession until we get to the pit stops. So for the fans that are only watching on television, it is a bit boring for them. But for those of us that know, we know there's a high chance of a safety car. We know that a well-oiled team can jump ahead of another car through a pit stop, whether it's the undercut or the overcut. And to those of us that know and have watched for many years, the excitement of Monaco, yes, I understand that it's a very expensive race. It's expensive to stay there. Berthing your yacht is like $7,000 a day. But, a lot of us who never own a yacht and to get to Monaco would be a dream.
I would tell you that the race, when we went, it costs us more to go to Las Vegas, which for me, living in San Francisco, is only 1 hour and 15 to 20 minutes away. It cost me more to go to the race in Las Vegas than it did to go all the way to France, all the way to the Principality of Monte Carlo and Monaco. Yes, it cost me more to go to Las Vegas. So for all the people who think it's really expensive, it really, comparatively to Las Vegas, compared to Miami, it's not. It's not.
I think the truth of it is that a lot of the street circuit races are, there's girders everywhere you look. There's big railings, and people think that they're going to have the obstruction of view. And I think that for the watcher on television, it's difficult to follow if it's just going to be a bit of a procession and there isn't overtaking opportunities. And that's why they get a bit bored. And that's why they think, you should take Monaco off the calendar. But they'd be wrong. I think it would take away the entire essence. It's like taking away Silverstone. It's like taking away, I suppose, Imola has turned out to be exciting but difficult.
It'd be like taking away Monza or Spa. Those are, when you think of Formula One, you think of Spa, Monaco, you think of Silverstone, you think of Suzuka. If you took any of those tracks away, I think you're right. The essence of Formula One would be missing.
Yes, yeah, I think so too. And then the problem will be, and I don't mean to be rude, but it'll be paid tracks. And that's dangerous. Like there are some tracks we just don't need to be at. Saudi Arabia, some of the sort of more Gulf state ones. Like I'm not a fan of the Abu Dhabi race. I just don't like the track. It's a completely paid for, laid out track that doesn't necessarily bring the excitement that one would hope for. And yet they want to get rid of the old traditional. And again, this isn't probably an age thing, but I've grown up since the age of 5 watching Formula One go to original tracks and the dangers that were inherent back then. I don't go back as far as Straw Bales when you watch the old footage from the 1940s, 50s, 60s. But, I have watched it since the 60s and safety came into it at that stage. But, I was there, unfortunately, for the death of several drivers. And safety has become very apparent. And I actually admire the amount of safety. I hated when we brought in the roll hoop. Absolutely. I was one of the, agitators who really, really was unhappy that they were bringing in the hoop. And now, like they said, look, a couple of years into it, you won't notice it. And we don't. And it is for their safety. And if it wasn't for that safety hoop, several drivers would have been badly injured by now. And
so for our American fans, he's talking about the halo.
The halo. Thank you. I forgot the name. And yeah, I was a hater of, we're all haters of lots of change. And the one thing I despise, and I will, to the day I die, is the sprint races. And I get that they are entertainment value, but they are watering down the value of Formula One and what its essence is, which is 3 practices to fettle and settle your car. Get your car into the best operating window and then go out and do pole and get to the top of the class. And the fact that they've brought in the sprint races is purely for television value, and it really annoys me. Even though it's entertaining, But that's the problem. This was not about being entertained. And then there's a suffering for the cars that aren't set up correctly. And I know they've changed it this year so that they can take them out of Parc Fermé after the sprint race, but it's still wrong. It's just not what Formula One was created around, and therefore it shouldn't be watered down.
Now, hopping back to the Monaco qualifying, what happened to Lewis Hamilton, who in first practice was number 1, in second practice he was number 2, in third practice he was number 3, and then here we go into qualifying and he's number 7. What happened?
Okay, this is a long story.
Don't make it that long. Don't make it that make it controversial, but not very long.
All right, well, it's going to be controversial. So forget what happened in qualifying. It's all about the interview that is now on Facebook and it's now on YouTube, where Lewis was interviewed afterwards, and he's quite pally and friendly and talks a little bit more to the Sky F1 presenters. And he basically mentioned something about a new front wing that was put on George's car, but not on his. They only had one. And a lot of people, and the commentators as well, mistakenly said, it was offered to Lewis, but George took it because Lewis refused it. Well, that's not actually what we were told by Lewis. Now, I don't think that Lewis is a liar, and I don't think that Lewis needs to be a liar. He's very wealthy and very successful, and he's quite happy in his lot that he's moving to Ferrari next year. So he gave them, and if you don't mind, this is going to take a second.
Go ahead.
He gave them 1 full year's notice that he was going to leave and go to Ferrari. Nobody bothers to do that in Formula One. Only somebody who's trying to help a team. And he was staying for this year so that they could pick another driver, that they could fix this car that has been a disaster since the creation of the newer designs with the underflow. It looks like an octopus in water. I hate the new design. And I really do. It looks like a stingray in water. So, yeah.
I like stingrays, but it does look like a stingray.
Yeah. Well, so what's the guy from Australia who died because of a stingray? The animal guy.
Yeah, the animal guy. Paul. What was his name? Okay.
Oh, look at this guy. He's just great. Anyway, so he was Steve something was his name. So anyway, look, Lewis gave them a year's notice deliberately so that he could stay to help the team, that they could turn this car around, and potentially he could get back the championship win that he was supposed to get before he left to go to Ferrari. And the deal, it seems, has gone sour. That he has now said, yes, George was 2/10 ahead of me, and I think it might have had something to do with the front wing, but that was not what he was alluding to afterwards, where he said, you are not probably going to see me out-qualify George for the rest of the season.
Right.
And he did that deliberately so that the interviewer would then follow up with a question. Why don't you think that would be? And Lewis gave that wry smile that he does and shrugged his shoulders. And he is alluding to the fact that all of a sudden, the deal that he made with Mercedes to help them and be involved and stay there, as in stay involved in developing the car, it looks like something has happened at Mercedes and he is now getting the cold shoulder and he's hurt. He is emotionally hurt because Lewis has always held his emotions on his sleeve. He's always been very open about this. And if you watch this interview and you watch what Lewis says and does, you will get the picture. Something has happened at Mercedes and he's not a happy guy. And I'm very upset because I thought they were literally arms locked, himself and Toto, and therefore the entire team would follow suit. And something has happened. And I think George has whinged, or Mercedes upper management have said, look, he's going to leave, so we can't talk tech with him. We can't share anymore. And I think this is going to be the big story, and you're hearing it now because I posted this immediately when I saw that this interview, and I was dumbfounded. I was shocked. So there you go. That's what I think this big news is going to be, that now I think Lewis is going to flounder in the Mercedes for the rest of the year. And he is alluding that he is not going to get the best settings. And he said, how come I'm so fast in practice 1, practice 2, practice 3, and then I get into qualifying and I'm pretty okay in 1 and 2, and then suddenly my car is like 2/10 off. I think he's almost intimating that they're changing his settings or depowering his car to ensure that he will not outqualify George. And that's the big caption here. Now follow the story from here on.
As a Hamilton fan, I do not think that that's controversial. I 100% believe that George is supposed to be the leader of the team next year. And so since George is staying and Lewis is leaving, we have to make sure that we prop up George, keep his confidence up, because we know if he's in the running for winning a race, he may crash. He may crack under the pressure. So we have to prop him up. We have to stroke him. We have to give him the confidence that he can do it. And we can't do that if Lewis keeps beating him in qualifying, if Lewis keeps beating him in the race, and Lewis beats him down like he did last year, he won't be able to recover. Because I'm not going to say George is fragile, but I'm going to say he definitely doesn't have nowhere near the racecraft, of course, as a 7-time world champion does. He doesn't have, and in my opinion, he's part of that group. It's Charles Leclerc, it's Lando Norris, it's Alex Albon, and it's him. And to me, out of all those guys, and really it's Max, because Max was racing along the lines with all those guys too. And to me, out of all those people that I just mentioned, he's the last one. I think Albon's better than George. I definitely know Lando's better than George, and we both know Charles is better than George, and Max, we can't even compare him to Max. Out of all those guys, he's running 4th or 5th. He's not in the top of his class. And I feel bad for Lewis because I thought that Toto Wolff, and we know that Formula One is ruthless, but I really thought that Toto Wolff was going to be different. I really thought that they were really truly friends, and that Toto Wolff would treat him with a little bit more dignity and respect and wouldn't let that happen to Lewis. I really thought that, and I was disappointed to see that interview. I was disappointed to, just by watching, could tell, I was like, wait, he's not as racy as he was in these practice 1, practice 2, practice 3. What happened? They didn't change the settings. They didn't change, because he was always trying different settings all through the year. He's been talking about that. And I was like, something else is up with this. And then I saw that interview and I was like, oh man, they don't want him to be ahead of George. It's just very disheartening as a Formula One fan to know that they just won't let him go out and race and let the best man win.
If I may, I don't want your viewers, your listeners to think that I'm fooling myself, that once somebody says they're going to leave a team, that the door doesn't get shut a little bit. Of course it does. But the inference and the appearance was that Lewis went to them early and said, guys, I'm going to leave in a year, but I'm going to help you deliver this car. I'm going to help you mend this car. I'm going to help you fettle and settle this car. And I think that he is truly hurt because Lewis doesn't make mention of things like this. He's mentioned this as if it was a situation has now developed, and he realizes that we're only a quarter of the way into the season, and the deal that he had struck with them for him to stay and hold his head up and do everything that was right for the team with an honesty, that was the point of this. And I think that this has been suddenly taken away and it's been slammed, the door's been slammed in his face, and he's truly hurt by this, because otherwise he would have gone, hey guys, I'm leaving. The deal is you do what you have to do. Is that what we're going to do? Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Fine, then I'll just run this year in the best way we can. I get it. But no, I genuinely think that something has happened in Mercedes and the rules have changed, and Lewis is feeling shut out and hurt. And I think that, for him to say something in a press conference, which he led the commentator to ask him the the question, sorry, what do you mean, Lewis? And so he deliberately led them to that point. And I think it's going to unfold in the next while. And also, if you've noticed the interviews with Toto, he looks like a man who's ill. He is very unhappy, very unimpressed. Toto alluded to him leaving a couple of years ago. And, now he's been faced with his star driver is leaving. And I think it's their own doing. Toto is part and parcel of Mercedes Senior, and the deal that wasn't handed to him with the ambassadorship for Lewis to stay on afterwards has led to the moment where Lewis decided to leave and go to Ferrari with a fabulous payday and the chance to win a championship in a different car. And I think that the whole thing is unraveling for some reason, and we won't know. But it's like everything. I mean, Lewis has a book ready to go about what happened in 2016 with Nico Rosberg. And the bullying and the mind games and all the stuff that happened within the team. And Lewis, is a gentleman and he hasn't released it yet, but he's always said, well, you'll read it in my book later. And I now think that this is a whole new chapter for this book, because I think that the deal he struck with them is part of his package to stay with them for a full year's notice. They're not living up to it now, and he knows it now, and he's actually upset. There you go. I'm not going to keep on about it, but I'm truly hurt for him, because I can see he's hurt by what's happening.
I can't wait for that book. I can't wait to read about what happened at McLaren, especially with Jenson Button. I remember it like it was yesterday with the settings. And remember, for you out there in the ether world, for you out there listening to the podcast, now the drivers share their telemetry. Before, they didn't do that. They didn't share what my settings are, or my settings on my side of the garage. What your settings are, that's your business. They didn't start doing that until Lewis had said that they leaked it to Jenson Button, because, Jenson, who I love, who, if you give Jenson the car, he's probably one of the top 3 smoothest drivers in history. He's so smooth. But if the car had any wrinkle, Jenson couldn't handle it. And so they gave his telemetry, and I remember it like it was yesterday, to Jenson and his settings. And Lewis had put that on, I think it was on Twitter or Instagram. I think it was on Twitter. He had released it, and it was such a huge controversy back then. Do you remember that, Paul? It was such a huge controversy because the drivers didn't share that. And Lewis was trying to say, look, he's doing the exact same things I'm doing, and he got my telemetry. How did he get it? Where did it come from? I didn't give it to him. So now today, in today's world of Formula One, the drivers share all kinds of telemetry. They're sharing their settings and everything now, but they didn't used to do that. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and I cannot wait to read about that, because that's what I was interested. I was like, oh man, please release a book so I can read about this. And then we get to learn all the things that happened with Alonso, and definitely all the things that happened with Rosberg. And like you said, Paul, now we're going to get to read another chapter of what happened the last year of Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes-Benz AMG Petronas. Now, moving on to one of my favorite drivers, and everybody's second favorite driver. They might have their first favorite, but everybody's second favorite driver is Yuki Tsunoda. The guy belongs in Formula One. He's proven it. Everybody they put in front of him, he beats them. I don't know why they don't want to give it. Well, to be honest, I have an inkling of why they won't bring him up to Red Bull, but that's for a different discussion. He deserves to be on a top team to really see what this guy can do. He keeps bringing that RB, VCAB, whatever, Visa Cash app, whatever you want to call it, into third qualifying time and time and time and time again. I'm really impressed with Yuki Tsunoda, Paul.
I think Yuki is a great driver. I think he's in the wrong team. And I think he has publicly now said in the last couple of days that he wants out of the Red Bull team because he knows that he will never get any further. And that car just doesn't seem to be getting developed to where it is a contender to win races in the future. And I think you're going to see Yuki go to, unfortunately, a lesser team for the moment. The rumor is that he might end up in Haas. The rumor is that they're not going to extend Kevin Magnussen's contract. We know that his partner, Nico Hülkenberg, or as I call him, Hülkenberger, he is gone. He's gone next year. He's getting ready to go to Audi, which will become Audi. And I think that Yuki's going to go to the Haas car. I've got a funny feeling. Talking of which, we need to talk about Haas as well. But Yuki is definitely, he's young, which is great, and he's a very talented young man. And as long as he stops swearing on the radio,
I love his swearing. He reminds me of Raikkonen. He's the only guy I actually just listen to Yuki's radio because he's going to say something crazy.
It was funny because apparently his manager has said something this weekend to Yuki, which was along the lines of, Yuki, think of it this way. Every time you swear on the radio, you lose 1/10 of a second. So it's like they're trying to train him not to use bad language. I don't know if you know this, but obviously there's bad language in Formula One, but I don't know if you know the origins of bad language on the radio. Are you aware of this?
No, I'm not. Enlighten me.
Okay, so the reason why bad language was used on the radios was because they knew they wouldn't air the transmission of the speech. So they could use bad language to stop them publicly putting their comments to other teams and to the public in the transmissions. That's how it started.
But now they don't care. They do it anyway, right?
No, they don't care. They just bleep it out now. I would love to just listen to and I know a lot of people give out about Drive to Survive. I know they do. But I find Drive to Survive is the other side of Formula One. And I know some people go, oh no, they over dramatize it, this and that. But I'm sorry, there is some essence and some core to the actual stories of what's really happening in Formula One, what goes on in the background, the old Hulk smash with the door, the brilliance of Gunther Steiner, who was constant bad language on Drive to Survive, and it was brilliant. The whole background story that happens on Drive to Survive is a wonderful insight to Formula One. And actually, I wish we could have that side of Formula One on a regular basis without the over dramatization that is, made for TV, done by Drive to Survive. It would be great to actually see that part of the light, the channel, the truth of what goes on.
Well, the one reason I watch Drive to Survive is I think the cinematography is awesome. When I watch it, it looks so good on my television set, and they're using 4K cameras, and I think they're actually might be using 6K, but they film it it's beautiful to watch, and I really like the cinematography. So I watch it as a podcaster and a guy who dabbles with Final Cut Pro and, does videos and stuff. I just watch it just for the cinematography and the beauty in which it's filmed.
It's funny you're saying that because, I think I watched my first race in black and white. And now when I'm watching in 4K, and I just marvel at the detail. And I marvel at how they've introduced cameras into every orifice of a Formula One car. And they give us some incredible insights. I'm waiting for the day when they can do like a proper, like the helmet cam version. Like they could even get a camera on the front of a nose of a person so that we get the absolutely perfect vision. But unfortunately, the halo will always get in the way. So we have to go left or right or above or below. So you never get the perfect view the way that the racer does. But recently we've had these in-camera helmets. They're not using them as much. I don't know if you've noticed. It hasn't been in the last couple of races. But it was a great view. But the problem was the vibrations were just vicious. So our eyes were getting messed up trying to watch, trying to focus. But anyway, the point is the Drive to Survive actually has a purpose. And apart from the introduction to tens of millions of new fans, I think the Drive to Survive attitude and style and a direction towards the other side of Formula One, instead of where fans catch up with Formula One, it tends to be, right, lights out, away we go, and here we go. And it's like, that's all they're getting to see, and then little bites of radio, and then pit stops and crashes and thrills, and that's it. But if you saw the other side and how they get there and what makes a team and the whole insight and inside to Formula One, I take hats off to Drive to Survive for doing it.
Carlos Sainz, he qualified in third. If somehow, some way, he can jump Oscar Piastri at the start, then Ferrari really can have a control of this race and split their strategy and really ensure that one of their drivers, hopefully Charles LeClerc, wins this Monaco Grand Prix. Now, lately it seems Carlos's form has been a little off. What do you contribute to that, Paul?
I think he's very downhearted. I think he's very downhearted that he's lost his contract with Ferrari. I don't know what his future is going to be, and I don't know if he does either. And we talk about the race tomorrow. It tends to be thrills and spills in the first turn. If I am concerned, I like Piastri, and I think Oscar Piastri is a very good driver, and he's proven himself, but he's still a rookie in Formula One. And I'm concerned tomorrow that he might be slightly over-eager, as might be Norris, to get to the front of this queue. And it could be that we actually have thrills and spills tomorrow at turn one. That's kind of my prediction, because it's all or nothing after turn one. That's it. You've got turn one, and then you might be lucky in a pit stop, but that's it. So I don't know, for Carlos and his future, it's a bit dim looking. He's been to a couple of teams. Before he got to Ferrari, I think he really thought he was going to make it, and we've seen some amazing drives from him. We've seen some wins, but what's his future like? And is it affecting him that he doesn't have a seat for next year? He's been to this before. So has Perez. I think Perez is done and dusted in Red Bull. I really do. I'm surprised they took him back last year, to be honest, this year, as in running this year.
My take on Perez is that they've won. Red Bull's won ever since Perez has come to the team. You can't have, I don't think Max, the way his temperament is, I don't think he could have a guy in the other seat that's going to challenge him, like Oscar or Lewis or Charles. I don't think he can have that type. Even Carlos Sainz will be a challenge for him, because remember, they were teammates before, and Carlos had the best of him when they were teammates. Is that a part of Max Verstappen's contract, that he gets to choose who the co-driver is? I don't think so. But I think that's the Red Bull way, because you remember, even going back to Vettel had Weber, and remember the ultimate,
Ricciardo.
And then when Ricciardo was challenging not only Vettel, but remember when Ricciardo was beating Verstappen?
Yeah.
Away he went.
Yeah.
Right? Away he went.
Yeah, Seb threw his toys out of his pram when Daniel started challenging him. And there's another one. What the heck has happened to Daniel? I think he's been on the money train for the last two teams. Just disasters. Absolutely disastrous. Something really has happened to Daniel, and you have to look past the smile and go, wow. I mean, his move from Red Bull was, I need to get away from Max. There's no other way. And then he went to Renault, I think it was at the time.
And he did really well. Payday. I thought he did really well with Renault too.
Yeah, huge payday. And then he moved over to, who did he go to after that? I'm sorry. What was his team before this?
Well, he left.
McLaren.
He was with McLaren, and he did horribly. I mean, Lando destroyed him.
So he went from Renault to McLaren. Okay, and again, big payday. And then he got ousted from McLaren, and he got a massive payday. However, there was a lawsuit, which I don't know if many people know about this. After the McLaren episode, there was actually a lawsuit against him. And he lost it. I think he lost about 8 or 10 million of that.
I didn't know that.
Everybody thought that he was that. Yeah, you need to look it up. And I saw an article on this, and I really didn't know about this. It sort of just got slipped out one day, and I was like, really? And I don't have enough information, so I would never sort of, bloat or talk about something I don't know about. But there was a court case recently, and Ricky lost. But my point is this, that he and not to take away from Carlos Sainz and a few others we're talking about, but I do believe that Ricciardo has lost his edge. He was lucky to be taken, I think he got like $1 million or $2 million to be a promo person for Red Bull when he came back in. And then he got lucky and he took the seat recently, but it's been an absolute failure. And I genuinely don't think that even if he sat in the other Red Bull seat instead of Perez, that he would have any of the talent, charm or edge that he used to have. And I think he's lost it. And I genuinely don't know how he's still retaining the seat that he is in Red Bull. And I will not be surprised if we are told that he is not retained for next year in the other Red Bull car.
Well, I think he's going to stay in VCAB only because, from what I've read, it's everything else. It's really not the driving. It's the face recognition. It's the happy-go-lucky. People recognize him. He can sell merchandise. And that is why Daniel was so wanted at Red Bull, the main group, because he would sell more merchandise. Everybody knows Daniel. Everybody likes Daniel. Everybody likes to talk to Daniel. The sponsors love Daniel. And that's why he's there. Unfortunately, right now, because it's not Force Racing. Because,
but again, my prediction is I don't think he's going to get retained next year, and he certainly isn't going to get elevated to the senior team. And I mean, I'm sorry, I can't remember if has Sergio Perez been retained for next year?
He has not. He's been offered a 1-year contract. His people came back with 2, and I think after the next race, if he has another qualifying performance like that, he'll probably take the 1. Because Red Bull has offered him a 1-year contract, and he wants 2. And I don't think.
So, are you saying that he'll be retained in 20? He will be sitting in that seat in 2025.
Well, he has not accepted the contract, and here's the rub. If he doesn't perform in these next couple of races, they might take that contract away, because we can offer it, but we can also say, well, you didn't take it, we're moving on. But I think Max.
So are we seeing a 1, potentially 2-year contract being offered to Perez in Mercedes? I think that's what this is lining up for.
Well, Carlos, I heard Carlos was also waiting to see if Max. There's rumors that if Max goes to Mercedes, then Carlos would go to Red Bull, and I think that's why he hasn't signed with Audi.
Yeah, But look, Max is not going to go to Mercedes in 2025. It will be 2026. And therefore, Carlos was going to have to sit out for a year, which will not suit him. And a lot of drivers lose their edge if they take a year off. A lot of them do. And I saw it with Kimi Räikkönen. We saw it with... Go ahead.
I don't think Carlos is going to take a 1-year deal with Mercedes, and I heard that he was already kind of offered that and he wouldn't take it. And I don't think a lot of drivers aren't going to take the 1 year with Mercedes, because they all know that they're trying to push Kimi Antonelli into the seat, and they don't want to take a 1 year and then Kimi comes and then there's nowhere for them to go. I think Carlos Sainz should just take the Audi contract and be happy, lead that team. We know it's not going to be that great for the first couple years, but it will have their own manufacturer. They will have their own engine. Audi brings a lot of money to Formula One, and I think from what I'm hearing, they're doing a lot of concessions on their powertrain. So they've been a lot of negotiations behind the scenes so Audi can come out and look very well and very, very good and not be a backmarker.
Audi is not to be ignored. Audi has a history of coming out of the box very well and very precisely, and they are one of the best in racing in other categories. They showed up at Le Mans and they won. And if they're coming to Formula One and they've been planning this for a long time and they've never entered Formula One before, they will do well, and it will be a challenge to the other manufacturers out of the box. And I do mean this. They're not to be ignored not for a moment. Usually it takes a team 2 to 3 years to get a foothold in Formula One. So, the first year you're the rookie, you have to, excuse me. Sorry, I'm still getting over a nasty chest cold. Yeah, and anybody that ignores Audi would be doing so at their own peril. So
I think Carlos should
it's
take
going
that.
to be very interesting.
He should take that contract, because I always say the bird in the hand, right? They were the ones who courted him. They're the ones who want him. Go to the place that wants you. Go to the place that you will feel comfortable. If they want you, they're going to make you feel comfortable. So go to where you want it, you know?
And it gives you a 2 to 3 comfort zone.
Yeah. So
we got to remember, in Formula One and in all these really extreme sports like this, there's only a certain amount of years that these guys can train, diet, give up their lives, give up everything to be the person that sits in these rocket ships. And Audi's going to need some really skilled drivers. I'm surprised they chose Nico Hülkenberg. He is the longest. I think he's the longest running driver without a win. And I was very
without
surprised,
a podium,
but I'm
not just the win, without a podium.
Yes, you're correct. Without a podium, and but I just do hope that it will go well for Nico. I really do. I wasn't fully up to date with the fact that Carlos had actually been offered to go to Audi. And you seem to be quite sure that he has been offered a contract to go to Audi. So maybe this is a piece I missed. But that still leaves the question hanging over Sergio Perez. And would Mercedes feel that Sergio Perez has enough to offer to take that seat?
I think they would.
If they gave it to.
Because then he would. I think he's the consummate number 2 driver. Because he's going to try to race in the beginning. And then once you beat him down, he's just going to, be happy being number 2. He has a huge following. I've been I'd say the last 3 years, probably maybe 8 races, and every race I go around the world, Sergio has a huge Mexican following. The Mexicans travel. Oh, yeah. I mean, they travel, they buy the merchandise, they support Sergio, and I think he brings, he's going to bring butts in the seats, he's going to bring, people are going to buy his merchandise, and he doesn't rock the boat. He's not that rock the boat driver. He's going to get in, do his job, do the best that he can, and I think we've seen him at his best. It's pretty good. I mean, he's never going to be a world champion, but Sergio at his best is a top A number 2 driver, solid Formula One driver, and he's going to win some races here and there, especially at street tracks, which was kind of weird that he didn't do well at Monaco because he's won Monaco before. But I wouldn't put it past Mercedes to bring Sergio over for a year, and knowing that he's only going to be there a year, and maybe have some type of stipulation where, okay, I'll be here a year, then I'll go to Williams after that, and you can take Kimi Antonelli and put him in the seat. But some say he might just retire. If he doesn't get the Red Bull seat, he might retire. That's what some people say.
What I understand from you is that you lean towards the concept of drivers will bring and put bums on seats for tickets and viewing eyes and selling merch. But for a team, they need to be hiring, and in their eyes, they always need to hire somebody who, well, obviously is a crowd pleaser, but they have to be a challenger and they have to drive so that they can score the most points. So I would differ from you in the concept of why a driver would be hired. I differ from your opinion where Daniel is concerned, that I don't believe that a team takes Daniel on just because they're pleasing to the eye or, they bring more fans. It's got to be about winning and getting points, because that's what puts them up onto the podium places, which brings them the most amount of money. Okay, it may not actually, the money that is raised from winning versus the money that's raised from merch. And we have the absolute pinnacle here. The day they announced Lewis, Ferrari's shares jump 40% apparently, and he has paid for his entire journey with Ferrari in one afternoon. So from that point of view, I understand what you mean. But at the same time, these are racers, meaning the teams. They are there to win. It sells more for them in cars and road cars and glory than anything else. And so I'm not sure that I would, it's great that we can have a different opinion. But I don't know if people are hired based on their favoritism with a fan. You've got to be a good driver. You've got to be a winner, and you've got to have the want to win and the belief that you can win. And so does the team need to believe that you can win. Otherwise, there's no point. And the concept of hiring a first seat and a second seat, technically at the start of every season, everything is reset, and it's all up for grabs until we get into a halfway point where somebody is way ahead of the other, and then maybe there's favoritism, sure. But anyway, look, that's just my opinion. I don't know if I believe that teams are hiring people based on favoritism that would bring fans and sell mugs and T-shirts and hats. I think it's about the spice and score.
I would say it's partly that, but when we take a look back and we step back from Monaco qualifying, Sergio Perez is third in the championship right now. Obviously, Red Bull's leading the Constructor Championship. Ever since Sergio Perez has joined the team, they've won championships. So you need a good second driver, and I think Sergio Perez, while he may have lapses here and there, he's still a good, solid number two, because Max is going to be Max, and all you need is somebody who doesn't upset Max, that he gets along with, and Sergio fits that role, and they've won every world championship since he's joined the team. So until they don't win, then you can decide to get rid of Sergio. But I think for now, he's a good fit for the team. He's still third in the championship. He's not like he's sixth or seventh in the championship. Yes, he's far off Max, but he's never been a good qualifier anyway, his whole career. And I think if you put anybody else in that seat, yeah, they'll probably qualify better. Yeah, they'll be a little bit closer to Max, but we all know the car is made for Max, and everybody else would have a difficult time in the Red Bull seat because the team is geared for Max and everybody knows it. And that's why no one's jumping to go to Red Bull. No one's clamoring. You don't hear any rumors about this guy or that guy wanting to get the Red Bull seat. It's always the homegrown guys, right?
Very true. Very true. I don't know. I think it's actually a very interesting season that's coming up next year for seat swapping, the next 2 years, for seat swapping, for engine change, for regulation change. And I think the Formula One has become far more interesting than we thought it was going to be.
It has. It really has.
Yeah, Newey leaving Red Bull, Lewis going to Ferrari has changed what we all thought was going to be a set and boring 2025 because the regulation changes and the engine freeze. And actually, I think 2025 is going to be even more interesting. And I also strongly believe now that all the teams have seen the development from the Red Bull car and they're catching up at tremendous pace. Drivers accepting that they're in second place, they're few and far between. And that's the payday, which is what I was discussing with you earlier about Daniel Ricciardo, which is, I think that Daniel has settled for, well, I'm never going to be a world champion. I might win the odd race here or there, but I'm now in it for the pay. And he has had some very handsome paydays based on the fact that he was at Red Bull and won a few races, but never won a championship. So there are some racers who realize their worth and they maneuver themselves between different teams at different times for certain lengths of contract, but it's about the payday. If I can't be the champion, if I can't win a championship, then it's going to be about, well, if I'm going to risk my life and do this diet and health and the entire life that I lead, it's all about being the best driver I can be in Formula One, then it becomes about the payday. And I get very sad when I see that, because technically it should be about, and I don't mean to be rude, but it's balls to the wall. You need to be bringing this, that you are the best driver that you can be. And I just feel like Perez is in it now for the package. I don't think that I don't know whether he's been beaten down by the team, knowing that he's the second driver.
I think he has.
I think he starts each year with the belief that he can bring it to Max, and then Max just goes and just leaves him for dust. And then he just goes, oh, what am I doing this for?
Well, so you remember last year he had that run of, I think it was like 3 races where he was either first or second, and then he was clamoring that he was going to win the world championship or that he's in contention. And then the next race, Max beat him by 30 seconds, And then we even talked about it on the pod. Max woke up and said, "Oh, you think you can beat me?" and destroyed him. And I think that destroyed his confidence. And I also think that Max probably went to Christian Horner and the powers that be and said, "This guy can't win the championship. I never want to hear about him talking about winning the championship again." And you never heard it. You never heard him say that after that race ever again. And I think Max just, what I'm not we know, I know I get frustrated. He's confounding.
Let's just say we did and don't, okay?
But what I like about him is I like the quality, because I'm kind of that way too. I am who I am. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. If you don't like it, well, I can't help you with that. I'm going to tell you the truth, and you're going to have to digest it. And I like people like that. He's very focused on who he is, and he's going to be who he is. He does not compromise himself. And so I'm 100% sure that he said, "You think this guy can beat me? Well, I just showed you. I don't want to hear anything else about that. He's the number 2 driver, and that's it." And they've said, "Yes, Max." Because you can hear him on the radio, how he talks to his engineer, how he talks to Christian. He could care less. He knows that team revolves around him. He knows it. And he's using the power that he has, like Schumacher used to do, like Senna used to do. He has power in that team, and he's using it. Unlike some of the other drivers, I think he wields his sword more than any other driver probably in the history of Formula One. He knows he's number 1, and everybody in that team knows it.
I'm aware of the time, and I know that we've been talking for a long time today, and I've really enjoyed being on your podcast, and I'm really grateful. Before we wrap this up, I wanted to say to you that, I'm old enough to have watched a lot of drivers mature through Formula One. At one stage, I really disliked Seb, and then halfway through Ferrari, when he knew that it was kind of time, he became a different person, and he grew up and was a much nicer human being. And the same would have been said at the time, unfortunately, of Schumacher.
Yes.
Who was difficult and troubled and so driven. And then, towards the end of his time, he became a much, much nicer person. And it is the one trait of a lot of these Formula One drivers that, they're risking their lives doing this. And at one stage, they were risking their lives. Now, the crash cells are so good that there's a very small chance now of you actually, God forbid, dying in a race compared to what it used to be. But there is still an element of it. And the competitive streak and the testosterone and all the things that come with it. But when you actually get the chance and you get older, and this is for all the viewers, so you get to watch these people go through their career, and then they come out the other side, and thankfully they're still racing, but they might be just a little bit more mellowed and much better with the public. And this was something we saw with Seb. I adore Seb now, and I really didn't like him in the earlier days. And the same was for Schumacher and a dozen other drivers. The only one I still don't like really is Alonso. He's just been the same character all the way through. And I don't think he's changed at all in his older age. But, and Lewis, we watched Lewis, but Lewis gave us the impression that he was under the thumb with so many different things. And then when he finally broke away from his dad and he broke away from McLaren, who he was so grateful for giving him a start in Formula One, but then he went to Mercedes, and then you saw him blossom as a human being, and just the whole human side of him, and doing and following other passions as well. And I love that about Formula One. I love watching these drivers with intensity and then watching them change, and the edge that we just dislike on TV, because they're only in these small sound bites that we see them with adrenaline flowing after a race, and we get the wrong impression of them so many times. And it's wonderful then when you get to see the human side of them eventually when they're sort of older. There you go.
I agree with, man, you said what I believe, because I did not like Vettel in the beginning. Oh man, I could not stand Vettel. But when he got to Ferrari and I got to see a mature human being and a different side to him, because you, like you said, you only saw sound bites, but then when he was at Ferrari, you got to see another side of him. And I think he matured like we all do. As we get older, we mature and we kind of let our hair down, what little I have left of it. I mean, I still have a full head of hair, but it's all gray now. But we get comfortable with who we are, comfortable in our skin and what we're doing in life. And I hope that one day we get to see, I don't know if Max will be around that long, but I hope that we get to see another side of him as he matures. And like you said earlier, he used to never thank his fans. He never thanked the engineers. He never thanked, like Lewis thanks everybody and their mom. And he's always done that. And he's very cognizant of being on camera because, you know, away from Formula One, you could walk down the street and you show Lewis a picture. People will know who he is and they won't have any idea about Formula One. But I hope we get to see another side of Max down the road. I hope we get to see that maturity level of a different person who thinks about other human beings and tries to enact his power and his platform into causes that mean something for other human beings to uplift them. I would love to see that. And before we go, Paul, I want to say thank you for taking this last hour and a half discussing Formula One. And I think you do it in a way that I really appreciate. You're very well thought out. You're very well read about Formula One. And it's been a pleasure having you on Merica F1. And we hope to connect with you again. And that would be our pleasure. And I could have Mike, and maybe you could calm Mike down a little bit because we all know how crazy Mike is. And hopefully he won't be drinking on the show as usual. But it's been a pleasure. And I want everybody to tune in because we're going to put this show, I'm going to put it up really quickly. We're also going to try to put it on Facebook, on your Facebook.
I will put your link on Sir Lewis Hamilton #1. I'll put it on Mercedes Petronas AMG F1 team, and I will put it on the other one, which is the Sir Lewis Hamilton Ferrari F1. And it will be on those. It'll also be on the Ted Kravitz, which I don't know if you know who he is, but he's the English presenter that does the Ted Walkabout on Sky F1. So I'll be putting it on all of those because that's where I'm a moderator and admin on some.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul, and it's been a pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in for another episode of Merica F1. And as we always say, keep on racing, everybody.